No. So for the people on the show, let me start again. Is that better? Oh, you got the volume going there. Okay, so the insurance has been a topic of great interest to a lot of officials, particularly those who drive motos. Recently, the members of the TC got together and they were looking at the various policies that are currently in place at USA Cycling and really started digging in on the details. As a result, we put together a 4-page document that was scenario-based questions, and then we presented those to USAC staff. We got some wonderful answers back that made us feel a lot better about some situations, and we also got some surprising answers back that made us feel very uncomfortable. Fortunately, USAC, so there was one presentation that was underway being prepared on Friday, and as a result of the wonderful responsiveness of Tod Manning, our Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Operating Officer now for USA Cycling, there has been additional coverage found. I'm not sure exactly how it was found, whether it was purchased, whether somebody got another interpretation, but we are in a much better situation today than we were last week, on Thursday even. So let me dig into it. The information that I am presenting is current as of today. The authoritative information about any of the insurance is always going to be from USAC and its insurance brokers. For this presentation, the roadmap is going to be, basically it's going to be introduction of what is insurance and risk management, scenarios and coverage, officials and motor vehicles, official status, which is actually moved elsewhere, USAC medical insurance, NASO insurance, and then requests to officials that from Tod Manning. Disclaimer, this legal language disclaimer, Tod Manning asked me to put this in here. Todd's our CFO, so there it is. Go read the policies. Introduction to insurance at bike races. So the whole idea of insurance, it is a transference of risk. It is a means of risk management. So you are transferring your personal risk of having to pay for something that you are responsible for. You buy insurance and you transfer that risk to the insurance company. For our purposes, insurance at bike races that affect us is liability insurance, medical, and anything having to do with a motor vehicle. Liability is that which you are legally responsible for. Negligence is an act where you've done something a little bit out of due care. Liability accrues to that. As a result, you need to make somebody whole with the damages. Liability at a race can accrue to officials, race directors, the drivers of vehicles, the owner of those vehicles, to USAC, to others that are present, whether it be a results company, whether it be the company that's providing the fencing, any number of people. Lawyers are very creative when they are looking for the deep pockets when it comes to making their particular client whole. Our status as officials when it comes to a bike race and when it comes to insurance, the first item is we are considered by USAC to be independent contractors who work for the race directors. I am a lawyer, and an independent contractor, whether somebody is or is not, is a legal conclusion. So this is how USAC views us. At the same time, on that second bullet, officials are representatives of USA Cycling. We are asked to enforce the rules. We are licensed by them, or a lot of other things, but we are there as USAC's representative. But remember, we don't work for USAC. At the same time, officials are the frontline risk managers for USA Cycling. And what that means is we are helping everybody involved in the race manage some of the safety risks that are associated with that event. We do that with I put a couple of words in there, between the reminding, cajoling, persuading, pleading, arm twisting of race directors to have insurance in place, to have the proper safety precautions in place when it comes to fencing and marshaling and flagging and all of the other things that we do as officials to help ensure the safety of riders and others at that event. Moving on to scenarios and coverage. So the scenarios I'm going to go through in the deck here are as follows. So it's going to be about officials when it comes to motor vehicles, whether they're driving the vehicle, whether they're a passenger in it, or whether there are other vehicles at the race. We've already talked about the status, and then there's also the medical and liability coverage for various scenarios we'll be talking about. So jumping into the motor vehicles, there are a couple of conditions to have coverage, to have insurance coverage at a race if there's a motor vehicle. One, the driver of that motor vehicle has to have an MVR, motor vehicle report, done by their DMV and approved by USAC. USAC has a process now with LexisNexis. It can be done fairly quickly, in fact, scarily quickly through LexisNexis. So don't let that ever be a problem for getting an MVR report. When you're working with race directors, try to get them to do that as soon as possible. In fact, get them to do a whole bunch of people that they're going to have as drivers for their vehicles submitted to USAC, and we get those folks cleared. Any motor vehicle has to be scheduled or listed on an insurance application for the non-owned, hired, whether it be a car or a motorcycle. That has to be done at least 7 days ahead of time. The USAC can put things through on a much on a shorter schedule, but they really don't want to because it puts a lot of people churning and working late nights just so that we can put a race on someplace. If those conditions are met, so those two conditions, MVR for the driver and the vehicle itself, a particular vehicle, VIN number included, then you have coverage for any liability that arises from the use of that vehicle at the event. If either one of those conditions has not been met, then there is no liability insurance in place for that official. There's no liability insurance coverage in place for the driver of that vehicle, which is an official in this scenario, or the race director arising out of anything happening with that vehicle. The USAC insurance in these cases, so let's say that the coverage is in place, the USAC insurance is secondary to the insurance for the vehicle obtained by the vehicle owner. And there is no coverage for any property damage to the vehicle being driven by the official. Let's go back to that just for a second. So for the motor refs in the room, and I know we have quite a few of them, make sure you go talk to your insurance company. Make sure that you have an appropriate insurance policy that is covering you while you are working at a bike race event. Just go do it. Next scenario is the official is a passenger in or on a motor vehicle. The official will be covered for liability purposes under the USAC general liability policy, whether or not the motor vehicle is scheduled and listed on that previous slide with the non-owned, hired vehicle, whether it be a motorcycle or a car. Any other officials that are on the crew, they will also be covered under that general liability policy. Except if any official at the race is also the race director or promoter, they will not be covered under the general liability policy for any liability that arises as a result of anything involving that motor vehicle or a motor vehicle at the race. You guys all confused yet? Other vehicles. Officials are covered for liability arising out of use of any other motor vehicle at the race under the general liability policy, so long as the official is not the driver of that vehicle and they are not the race promoter. Kind of saying the same thing a little bit. But I want to talk, make sure you understand that there are other vehicles. So there's the lead cars, there are the pace cars, neutral support, mountain bike races. People are like, there's no vehicles in mountain bike race. Yeah, you often have shuttle vehicles that are shuttling people to the top of the hill so that the riders can start from there. Sometimes you'll have a lead motor out there or a follow motor that's going out to follow the riders. Make sure that those are also named. Before we get onto that one, there's a possibility that we are going to be seeing some, Todd Soul said that they are looking into some ideas to make paperwork easier to do, and the costs hopefully are going to be dropping. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. We have some initial conversations and ideas going, but they're off and running, and they're going to get back to us soon. As soon as we have that additional information, we'll be sharing it out to you. But I think things are going to be looking dramatically better for race directors and the officials as far as these insurance programs. So the general liability policy of USA Cycling, anytime someone is permitting an event and that $3 that's going in on a per rider basis, that is paying for this general liability policy. And that's for any of the normal things that may come up during a bike race. There are exclusions, however. So a lot of us will work an event where there is an expo or there's something else that's going on. There's a little kids race or there's something. That is typically not going to be covered under that general liability policy. I urge you to be cautious about becoming involved in anything which is not part of the permitted event. So USAC sanctioned an event. Be involved as an official with that event. If you go outside of that and you're helping with something else, you are on your own. Policy does not cover for any motor vehicles, as we've talked about. If you're an employee or workers' comp, any of those things, that is outside of the general liability. Any participant-to-participant injuries. So remember that code of ethics things about the officials not arguing in public. If they start punching it out with each other, liability arises, it's not going to be covered under here. And then the others are pretty straightforward. Oh, the professional liability for medical professionals, if we get somebody to help at an accident scene, at a race, this liability policy is not going to cover that professional. USAC medical insurance. There were questions on whether or not this coverage actually flowed through to officials. At one time, the language in the policies were a little clearer. Recently, it was discovered that the medical language was only talking about riders. It wasn't talking about members or licensees. We did get clarity on that. It covers all licensees, which is us, as well as riders. Those benefits are the $25,000 maximum. I do have a question. I wasn't able to get an answer before this presentation. I know that a year ago there was they paid 70% up to a maximum of $25,000. It's secondary to your own insurance. But the way I'm reading the current one, that 70% isn't in there. I don't know if that's accurate or not, so please don't quote me on it. Be willing to look into the policy itself. And understand that it is secondary, so the excess coverage, and this kind of caught me, the matching deductible. So if you have a medical insurance policy that has a $5,000 deductible, the deductible with USAC will also be $5,000. So you will pay the first $10,000. So National Association Sports Officials, I think there's an of in there, NASO. USAC bought a group membership, and we got some pretty good deals as far as becoming members for NASO. Anybody who is a member of NASO, they don't get medical insurance, but we do get $3 million of general liability insurance as an official. And as they reiterated to me in an email, in all caps, bold, $3 million, any game, anytime, anywhere, any sport. Pretty cool. And once again, if a motor vehicle is involved, there is no general liability protection from NASO. I urge all officials, if you are not a member of NASO, please become one. It is in your best interest to do so, not only for the insurance product that is provided, but they have some excellent publications. Well, and those publications talk a lot about officials, and there's things there that are not bike specific, but they're definitely officiating specific, and you can learn a great deal. So our officials' duties. This had been things that have been asked to present to you by Todd Soul. And then I find it's like, I got to take that out. It's a little bit too aggressive. So what we are looking to all of our officials out there, especially our chief referees, is to strongly suggest to race directors that the waivers need to be obtained from everybody who's participating in the event. Riders, volunteers, any of the independent contractors that are helping out at the event. Get them to sign, this is not your job as the official. It is the race director's job. Get the race director to get those people to sign waivers because it helps USAC as a whole. So that's part of our frontline risk manager duties. And it also helps protect the race director. And that's part of the sales job for the race director. Emphasize in whatever way that you can, if there are any motor vehicles at the event, that it is in the race director's best interest to have that non-owned hired vehicle insurance in place. So try to persuade them to do that. If there are any changes in the event itself, you want to make sure that the race directors have communicated that out to the community, because evidently there have been, well, actually, I'm not sure exactly why that's in there. I can surmise, but let's not go down that path. And then make sure that the race director has a sufficient number of adequately trained volunteers to do the jobs that need to be done there, especially those jobs that are involving safety, the control at intersections, the marshaling, the people that are controlling the crosswalks in a criterium. Have it be that there are sufficient people there and that they're trained. This is one of your jobs. Make sure that all riders that are out there on your course, that they are licensed. They have an annual license or a one-day. We have all seen a situation where buddies of the race director, they've been helping, and all of a sudden they're on the course, and you're looking at them going, I started 58 riders, and yet you're showing me registrations for 55. Who are these other 3 riders? And then you go compare license numbers, and you go, I don't have licenses for 3 of these riders. You need to have a chat with not only the riders, but the race director. And that's one of those things, you're going to get caught. It happens. Important that all changes to the course or the event itself that are going to affect the riders, that is communicated to the riders. If we had a course that we use all the time up in Washington, and went out, I'm the chief, great, getting ready to start it, and I just did a quick sweep around the course. It's a little circuit course, and there's a brand new set of rumble strips that have been put in the day before. And there's still the gravel from where they had gouged out the rumble strips, and so we had to add more people out there to get the riders past that because it was chewing up tires. Do a course inspection with the race director so that you can identify any safety issues that are out there on that course. That is your responsibility. Whatever you find, communicate it to the riders. At least make the attempt to communicate it to the riders. We all know what it's like to make an announcement to a group of riders, and only the 10 riders that are nearest are actually paying attention, and there are others that they just aren't. But do what you can. If there is something that is unusual about a particular event, make your pre-announcement notes, write those notes, clip them to your chief ref report, just in case something happens. It's like, here's what I announced. Send that in. Make sure that you focus with the race director on the finish area, that all vehicles have been removed, that all of the requirements and the rules regarding the length and width of the finish straight are being met, that you do have sufficient controls there to keep people from crossing into the course while races are finishing. Ensure that first responders, the medical people, or whomever it may be, fire or police, that first responders are trained or informed on how to manage an incident at a bike race. I know we have all dealt with those folks. It's like, you can't tell us what to do. We're the professionals. But what we can do is say, recognize their authority, let them know, if you park in a certain way, we're going to have a lot more problems. We're going to have people running into your vehicle. If you park this way, we'll be able to get races passed and vehicles and other things. Do what you can to help make sure that they know ahead of time what to do. And then when an incident does happen, do what you can to manage it so that it doesn't get worse. Our focus out there, remember the triangle. The top of that triangle is safety. Always, always, always be thinking about what is the safe thing to do here. USAC insurance programs can be found with a lot of information. There's even more information there than I'd seen a week ago. So these are a great link. That's a great link there to go get information. And that finishes my presentation on insurance. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask at this time. Otherwise, I would urge you to talk to Todd Soul, and there is his email address, which I'm sure he is very pleased that I provided on this presentation. And Randy.
I'm going to go with the first question. If you go back a couple slides there where we highlighted inspect and insure, when you and I talked about that, the intention was that this is what USA Cycling's risk managers are really reminding us and asking us to do. But I think that we need to probably just talk about what inspect and insure means, because I don't think that's necessarily our job. That's what they're asking us to do. There are times that we can't inspect an entire course, and there's certainly no way we can actually ensure that the first responders are actually trained. But this is the message we're getting from them. There are limitations to what we can actually do as officials. That's my point.
Thank you, Randy. We have Kinnan up here also, and Frank. Frank, you've got the microphone. Go for it.
The car insurance or the motor vehicle insurance, is that protecting the race promoter, or is it protecting us
Yes.
as the official on the vehicle?
The answer is yes. And once that insurance is, so you've got two things. Is the insurance, if the MVR has been in place, the particular vehicle was listed or scheduled on the application, then if any liability arises out of the use of that vehicle with that driver, then the driver of that vehicle, as well as the race director, are protected under that insurance policy. On the converse, the driver may have really good insurance policy and may be protected. And remember, the converse is there is no non-owned, hired insurance in place. The driver of that vehicle has a really good insurance policy and they're covered. The race director is not covered. Okay? Kenan?
Well, I'm going to go back to the first slide. If we are considered independent contractors by USA Cycling, and if we are considered to be working for the race director, what do we do about the conflict of interest and the ethics policy? Is there a problem there?
Kenan, what I would like to do at this point is I'd like to call a friend. Sean. So, Kenan, would you mind repeating your question, please?
Because officials are considered to be independent contractors by USA Cycling who work for the race director, what happens to our ethics and conflict of interest policy?
I don't think anything really happens to the ethics and conflict of interest policy because they're dealing with the reality of how officials conduct business as officials and our officials programs and all the jobs that we do from the sporting aspect of the event. But that does lead me into something I did want to follow up on that Todd brought up. Essentially, it is our policy, which we will defend in court and have many times, that safety is the job of the race director. It is their event. It is their job to assure that the race is safe. That is sometimes in conflict with other places on our website and in the rule book where we say things like the officials, especially the chief referee, will decide whether the course is safe. So ultimately, and I think it's consistent with what we've been saying here, it's not your job to get the waivers in your hand. It is your job to make sure the race director is doing it, or at least control, arm twist, whatever, that's the job of the race director. It is also the race director's job to provide a safe course, not the official's job. However, ultimately, on the day of, somebody's got to say go or not. And it's going to end up being the chief referee who's going to make that final call as to whether the race director has done his or her job and provided a safe racing environment. Now, of course, one of the other issues we have is try and find some place in our rule book or our officials' manuals that tells you what safe is. And you're not going to find it. And after being in something like 32 hours of depositions over the last 10 years, I know all the plaintiffs' attorneys have had trouble finding it and always want to know why it's not there. So we're recognizing that the officials are in an interesting position because safety is the race director's job. We're saying that you're hired by the race director and that you're independent contractors, yet you also have responsibilities to the safety of the sport, the integrity of the sport, and to USA Cycling, because you're ultimately the one that's going to decide whether this race gets to go or not. And of course, at some point, if something bad happens, and bad things sometimes happen, the officials are going to certainly also be there when all the lawsuits are being thrown around. Fortunately for most of us, it ends up not being much of an issue financially because USA Cycling's insurance policy covers the bill even when we lose. Also, Todd mentioned the waivers. Just got to reiterate, as I've done multiple times, how important those waivers are. We, quote, win almost all lawsuits on waivers. Okay, well, winning a lawsuit on waivers means we only spent $50,000 to get to the point where there was, a summary dismissal based on the waiver. Okay, but that is a whole lot better than losing the lawsuit, which is what's going to happen if there is no waiver. So that waiver is what is swinging the financial impact of the action, so that we'll get out of it for the $50,000 easy way out versus the having to go all the way through and have damages awarded to the plaintiff, and then USAC is named, and the race director is named, and the officials are named, and somebody has to pay a large bill. So again, those waivers are critical, but it isn't your job to run around to volunteers and go, here, would you please sign this? This is the race director's job to do that. It is the race director's race. I hope I conveniently sidestepped your question.
Todd?
One second.
So if the race director is responsible for the safety, and if the officials are considered to be working for the race director, and so where does that leave us? I mean, yes, we as officials understand that it's our job to ensure as much safety as we can. However, as employees then of the race director, but if we're working for the race director, doesn't that make us an employee?
Well, this is going back to we are not employees. So these are all legal terms. There's a legal relationship between us as an official, the race director. We are considered to be independent contractors, just like a results company is. So we are coming in to provide a service for that race director as officials. We are not employees of USA Cycling. Of course, there's a couple situations where I'd argue that we are, but that's not this presentation or audience. And for USA Cycling, they provide the training, the licensing, and we are representatives of USA Cycling to go out and help make sure the right thing is getting done when it comes to that. So, and the question was, do we the ramifications of being an independent contractor are you're on your own as far as being responsible for how it is that you are doing your job. When you're an independent contractor, you're responsible for paying your own taxes. There are no payroll taxes that are being held out of your salary. You are given a goal, and how you achieve that goal, that is up to you and to your expertise. When you are an employee, they'll be supplying the tools. They'll be telling you how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. And so we do have a different legal relationship here, and it's almost always in the courts across the United States. It's rare when an official is found to be an employee. And in those cases, there has been a lot more indicia of an employee-employer relationship, and we don't have that here. Does that answer your questions, Kenan?
Yeah, I still haven't seen him dance, but...
You don't want that.
You'll see an overbite here when he does it. Cindy?
In our LA, they are starting to, and our road season actually starts next week, come up with a car that will be with a field for the year. And I believe that they're going to even have the same driver for the year. Granted, it would have to have the insurance per race, but that individual may or may not have a USAC license. Can we still get them to go through the MVR process to make sure that step is covered?
Yes. And there are other things that are afoot, and we'll have more information coming out soon regarding a license that may or may not, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there's consideration of a license being issued to people just for being able to drive a vehicle at a race. And it will be a fairly inexpensive license on an annual basis. It will have an MVR approval, and that will be that. When it comes to the car itself, how that would work, I think you're going to need to, well, I'm not even going to step into it. That's beyond my area of expertise. So I would recommend that you have your local association contact USAC as well as the insurance broker. Maybe something can be worked out. Anyone else? John?
Assuming that we've updated, the local signer or the chief referee has gone in and updated the event permit site with your license number, is it possible for USA Cycling staff to notify the chief referee if all the paperwork has been completed for a non-hired vehicle so that we know who's supposed to be out there and what vehicles are supposed to be out there?
That was great suggestion. It was made by a number of folks on the TC, and Todd Soul took that away as a possible, well, took it away as he would look into it, and not sure where that's going to end up, but we do want to have it be that the chief referee does have the ability to know whether or not insurance is in place. One of the reasons that we were pushing hard for it was because of something that was no longer present, the issue. And at that time, we really were saying, if we don't have that insurance policy, we're not going to officiate. So fortunately, that has gone away. And I think whether or not an insurance policy is in place it's not really that paramount, I think, to the officials anymore.
Except that they understand it.
Yeah. Mr. Stone?
So,
But, and let me finish up that last point. So, John, I'm not sure where we are on that. We will continue to gather information and provide it out to the officials. It's still a good point. Steve?
so I am not an attorney, but I did have a beer with Todd once.
And I made him pay for it.
Yeah. So one thing I would encourage everyone to do, Todd mentioned NASO, and I am also a NASO member and a big fan of them. They have a wonderful publication that's called A Legal Guide for Sports Officials. I highly recommend you get that and read it, because it talks about what it means to be an independent contractor from an employment standpoint, and it talks about what is reasonable in ensuring safety for your event and what is a common practice for your sport and those sorts of things. Highly encourage you to pull that down. It is written by attorneys that are also sports officials. I found it to be very useful and very informative, and someday maybe I'll understand all of it, but it's well worth the read.
I have a copy of it if anybody would like to take a glance at it, see me after the presentation. So that kind of takes us to the end of the presentation. If anybody has additional questions, please feel free to speak to me after this. And otherwise, please contact Todd Soul. Thank you very much for your time.